Okay, so where we left off in the last video, I was talking about showing you how to combine maybe two rooms with a hallway and some of the difficulties you're going to have working with additive subtractive in terms of whether or not the additive is hollow and giving you an interior space, or whether or not you're using additive for the outside shell and subtractive for an inside shell. And I think to make it a little bit easier to understand, I have something set up here in a 3D program that I hope will maybe make what I'm going to be talking about here a little bit easier to understand. What you're seeing here is what looks like two perfectly similar, in fact, if not identical, boxes. You have an inside space, you have an outside space. Okay, so think of this as the two rooms we're going to make in the Unreal. And I'm going to put a little hallway that runs between them, and I've taken the top off just so you can kind of look down inside. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch over to wireframe, and I want to show you a basic difference between the two of the boxes in the way that they're constructed. So let me go here and I'll turn on edges, and I think maybe I'll change the color of these things so they're a little bit darker. If they're a little darker, it's a little easier, I think, sometimes to see the lines that are on there. All right, so if I look at this one, this would be the equivalent to creating a room using an additive brush in Unreal and then using the hollow setting. All right, now what I mean by that is I've got an outside surface down here and I've got an inside surface that has been created using the hollow command. And if you look in the corners, you basically see what's going on. It has reduced, it has created another copy of that thing on the inside, reduced it by shrinking down the exterior and then flipping it over so it makes an interior, if that makes sense. So what you see is the way that this angle does something like that. Now, if I wanted to punch a hole in the side of this thing, I've got a surface out here that is one size, and I have a surface in here that is another size. And if I wanted to create a cut, basically what I would have is if I took this outside, these outside edges here, and decided to do what a connect on this one, which would cut that in half. You see the length of this line. All right, now if I go to the inside and I repeat that same cut on the inside in exactly the same place, it's going to be centered in there. It's shorter than the one on the outside. Okay, so this line is shorter than the line that's out there. And most 3D programs, game engines included, when you try to take something and divide it, and you have an outside surface and an inside surface, it does it based on sort of the middle ground. It would look at the length of this line on the outside, look at the length on the inside, and then try to cut something according to the different sizes of those two things. I'm going to have a problem. Because if I'm trying to punch a hole in the outside and punch a hole in the inside, and I got to figure out where to make cuts to cut holes in things, I've got a longer surface here than I have on the inside surface there. If you look at this other box, the way that this other box is constructed, let me get out of that, come over here. The way that this box is constructed, it looks exactly the same. But basically, you'll notice that rather than having a diagonal in the corner where it's an outside shape and an inside shape, this is almost what we would consider an extrusion, where if I took this top surface in here and lowered it down like this, it's like extruded from there all the way up to where it needed to be. All right? But by doing it this way, what I've done is I've created a series of lines that are evenly spaced. This one and this one is exactly the same length as this one and this one. So the width across here is whatever the units happens to be. If I look on the outside, I have the exact same length. So if I'm trying to cut a hole in here and I'm trying to divide an outside surface and trying to divide an inside surface, I have the exact same measurement to deal with. So this is always a better solution for creating holes in things than this one is, even though this one is considerably easier to do. The way I made this in 3D, I'm not going to go into it, but when I made that, it's much easier. It took half the time to make this one than it did to make that. But if I wanted to do things above and beyond this box, this is the way that I have to go. Now, how does that relate back to here? Well, in essence, if I make that box hollow and I go back and I look at this thing in wireframe, and I'll zoom in on that corner right there. Okay. Okay. Imagine, if I'm looking at this thing down from the top, imagine in the 3D program there was a line that went from that corner to this corner, kind of like visually what you're seeing right there. It looks like the visual line that's running from here to here. That is what is happening when you're dealing with hollow. Okay, it's just shrinking down the inside box, and I have a surface on the outside that is longer than the surface on the inside. And what happens when we try to use multiple hollows? I can't do that. If I grab this box and I bring it and make a copy of it over to here, I have two boxes that are both hollow. All right, but I have really no way of going from one box into another one. I have no way of punching a hole in one of those things. And this is where subtractive really comes in handy. So I'm going to delete that here for a moment. I'm going to take this one and I'm going to turn off hollow, and I'm going to do what I did a moment ago, which is I'm just going to make a copy of that, hold down the Alt key and drag it a little bit. I'm going to make this one, I didn't do that one right. That's going to be 1,000. And then this is going to be 1,000. That makes it 12 units smaller. And then this one was 488, which makes it 12 units smaller that way. And then I'm just going to put it back at 0, 0, 0. So it's back inside of those things. So now I have two boxes, one inside the other. And this one is not sitting at 0, 0. So we'll put that back like that. So they're both sitting at 0, 0. I have one box inside of the other, but they are two separate boxes. Now I know what I said a second ago about having an outside surface that is longer than an inside surface. That remains the same. However, you're going to see how this works better here in just a moment. Now this inside box, that little one on the inside, has to be subtractive. So again, if I go back and take a look at this one, I have an outside surface and I have another box on the inside that is an inside surface. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to select both of those, and I'm going to hold down the Alt key and I'll drag another pair over here about like that. So now I've got, in essence, two rooms, inside, inside, and I'm all set. Right now, to create a hallway that runs through them, that runs between those two, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring out another one of my brushes. So I'm going to bring another box out here, and I'll just kind of set it there. And this is where I'm going to be changing my views. I'm going to go into my top view here, and I'm going to look to see, and I'll center that right there. And then I'm going to go into my left view, and I'm going to pull it down. And in this particular case, what I want to do is I want to line it up so these two things are even. I want to take that and I want to line it up and get it as close to the bottom of that previous box as I can get it. Now, the problem that I have is that they're not snapping to the grid. Okay, there's a grid set up, and you can see this box is on the grid, that box is not on the grid. And that box isn't either because I made it and aligned those two. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have to, over here, I'm going to turn off my grid for a moment, the snap, and then I'm going to raise that up until it's just about dead even with it. Then I'm going to turn my grid back on. That will solve that problem. Now that box here is 200 by 200 by 200, right? So if I look at this thing now from maybe the front view, what you'll see is it's not quite wide enough. Okay, there's one box, there's the little one, and then there's the other box right there. This is not quite wide enough. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of position that in the middle there, and then I'm just going to make it wider on the X in this particular case. So I'm just going to kind of, I need to have the outside of that go inside the other box. Turn that grid off so I can get this thing back up. Line that back up there like that. Okay, what I want is I need to make sure that this box that I'm dealing with here doesn't go into the inside space. It can't go in here. And you can see there's a purple line there and a red line there. That's the subtractive box. That's the additive outer box. Here's the little piece I've put between them, and it It overlaps the outside of this, but doesn't come into the inside of that. And the same thing is true over here. It's a little bit closer over there, so I think maybe what I'll do is I'll take that little one again, and let's make it not quite so wide. Let's go maybe 255. And we'll bring it back a little bit over there, a little bit over there. So it's overlapping, but it's not going to the inside. All right, that works really well. Now, height-wise, that 200 should be high enough if my character is 100. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to have to do this visually. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold down the Alt key, and I'm going to drag another copy of it. And positioning of it is okay. What I need to do is I'm going to have to make it not as tall. So I don't want it to be as tall, and I'll pull it down here so it's kind of, I want it to be the same as the inside of that one over there. That's the inside. Okay, it needs to be the same as that. I also need to go in here, and the X width has to be wide enough now to go clear inside, and you'll see why here in just a second. Kind of visually pick those up. We'll get them to line up a little bit. All right, maybe a little bit more. There we go, that'll do it. Okay, so now it's wide enough to break the inside of that subtractive over there and the inside of that subtractive. There's my subtractive one. There's that thing is wider than that. Now I'm going to switch to my top view. Okay, and there's the outside of that box. And then this shows me the inside. So it's narrower and longer here. In my top view. In my front view, it's wider and shallower than the other one. And then if I look on the left, I can see that I have one is contained inside of the other one, which is kind of what I want. All right, now I'm going to take this box here. And I think what I'll do is let me switch back to perspective real fast. And you can see from the outside what I'm looking at. Okay, and I go inside, there's nothing in there. Okay, if I go into this room, you can see there's one box sticking through there, and there's one box sticking through over there. That's the inside of that tunnel that I'm creating. You can kind of see it right there. It's sticking through, and it's going through the outside, and it's coming through onto the inside. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take that box, I'm going to change it from additive to subtractive. And what it does is it cuts a hole right clean through. All right, now here in the last minute or so before I have to break this video off, the reason I do it this way, and I'll go back over here to this, the reason I'm not doing it like that over here, I'm using this particular way of doing it. That's not what I wanted to say. I'm doing this one over here and not that one over there because of the fact that the way that this one is built, it makes it very difficult to get things to line up. It doesn't look like it would be, but it actually is really difficult based off of the way that that one is built. If you're going to be creating hallways, you want to use an outside additive and an inside subtractive and not a hollow box. It doesn't work quite the same. Okay, so it's a little bit more of a hassle, but at the same time, I get this really nice look going through here. If I come back over to this thing, I got this nice look. And I'm just going to real quick, I need to add a light in this scene because I do need to have some lights in here so I can at least get out and see what the lights are doing in here. So let me go back into my top view, and I've got one light that I'll center in that room. And I'll duplicate that light and I'll bring it over to this room. And let me look in the front view to make sure that I've got them maybe a little bit high in the ceiling. Like that. We'll go back in here to my perspective. And then what we'll do is we'll change this now to lit. And you can see if I come outside that space, I can't see anything because the lights are contained inside, but I actually have playable space in here. And the last thing I will do in the last 30 seconds is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add in a player start just so I can go in and see what it looks like. And there we go. And I can kind of fly around. And there's collision. I can't go through the walls. I can go through that gap. I can look up and I can see all kinds of stuff. But I have this nice space created with this nice hallway that I can run through to go between different rooms.